Welcome to Adding Fuel to the Hire, a podcast for hiring managers and job seekers across all types of dealerships. With over 20 years collective recruitment experience, Rowan, Tony and Phil draw upon their knowledge to help you navigate through the recruitment and job hunt process. For more information, head to our website, addingfueltothehire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Adding Fuel to the Hire. My name is Rowan Coe, and with me today is Tony Flynn. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Rowan.
Today we're here to talk to you about recruiting in this industry. If you missed our first episode where we introduced ourselves and had Phil in for the chat as well, we are specialists in recruiting into dealerships. This podcast is about hiring and getting jobs within the dealership industry. So we hope to be able to enlighten you with some stories and some tips and tricks along the way. So today we're just going to talk about the industry in general and why we like recruiting into it and why we do it. And
the specific challenges, I suppose, as to us. You know, every business has the same recruitment challenges as a whole, but I think the dealership sector specifically has its own idiosyncrasies too.
Oh yeah, it's definitely quirky, but that's kind of why we love it, isn't it?
That's it. I think the word I always use to describe it, and I think it's appreciated by both clients and candidates a lot of time, is incestuous.
Yes, everyone does know everybody. Yeah. You got trade shows all over the place and field days, and you know, they all sort of mix together. So everybody knows everybody, but at the same time, when they're looking for staff, you know, it can be difficult to get in touch with some of those people. So it's a tricky industry to navigate. So hopefully we can give you some tips there around that. So I guess one of the things that, you know, people say to me, you know, in recruiting this industry is, you know, when I go to a hairdresser or something and get a haircut, they say, you know, oh, what do you do? Tony, what do you say when somebody asks you, what do you do?
Usually I tell them I own a recruitment business, and you know, naturally that leads to what industry do you recruit into? And I tell them, it's dealerships, and they look at me and they like car dealerships, and yeah, sort of, but you know, like car dealerships, but trucks, earth moving, or agricultural machinery. And then you just get met with a very blank look on their face, and usually then it's followed up with the question, there's enough work in that?
Yes, I've definitely heard that many times. And I was actually just in Scotland on my honeymoon recently and did a walking tour of Edinburgh with a comedian, which was awesome. If you go, highly recommend it. But he went around the room asking everybody what they did. And, you know, there was a doctor and a nurse and all that sort of stuff there. And then they came to me and I just froze on the spot. And I'm like, because I always say the same thing, you know, like, yeah, I do recruitment.
Yeah.
Go the same path you go down. But this time I was trying to be different. So I say, I recruit. And then he's asking questions. He's like, oh, what do you mean? What do you recruit? And I said, I recruit for me because I said it was my business. But he's like, oh, so you recruit for you? So then I just made it simple. I'm like, I find tractor mechanics. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah. So I think that's my new one. I'm going to say something along those lines. Because he's like, what's your favourite tractor? And then we were talking about, you know, the Fendt tractor and Massey Ferguson. And, it was good. It was a good chat. But I guess, you know, there is a lot to love. And, you know, obviously we do this and we do it every day and sometimes some pretty long hours. So, you know, what is it about recruiting in this industry that we love, I guess? Tony, tell us, give us something that you can think of.
I think for me, and it's probably because I haven't had as many years experience specifically in these industries, but for me at the moment, it's a lot about the learning about the brands and just all the little intricate differences between each one of them. You know, every day I learn something new about something. But also I think the technology changes particularly is really interesting, particularly in the ag and truck space. It just fascinates me a lot. And I'm often find myself trawling through news articles, trying to just keep up with it all. But yeah, that's definitely the number one thing I think for me at the moment. Yeah,
there's so many bits and pieces to it that there's just a lot to research there and get swept up in. But I guess for me, one of the things I love is the thrill of the chase, the thrill of finding that, that perfect candidate, because you know, sometimes clients come to us, they've been looking for months, they haven't been able to find somebody and you know, I want to be able to deliver. So we work pretty hard on trying to find those people and, you know, just going out there and trying all the different methods and all the avenues we've got. It's I don't know, it's just exciting.
I think Yeah, that's the addiction part of it, I reckon, where because it is so incestuous, a lot of the time, where we have successes where people are nervous to put themselves out there because they don't want it getting back to their employer. And so you can pick up a role where someone's been trying for months and, there's just no one out there, and you get the brief and you know exactly who they're describing. You've spoken to them for years or months on the database and you just know. And then to be able to pull that off, I think is the most exciting part, because you know that, well, you've done your job well, but you've also been able to find someone that people weren't able to just purely through a connection, because of the incestuous nature of the industries.
Yeah. And our database is, 11 years old or something, and we've got candidates on there who have been on there that whole time. And I love it when you get a phone call from a client and they're explaining the type of candidate that they're looking for, and immediately somebody from, for me, 4 or 5 years ago that I've spoke to a few times, who I know and know, intimately and understand their experience, getting them, having them come to mind, and being able to say to the client, well, actually, I've got the perfect candidate in mind. It's, I like that. That's rewarding.
It's a dangerous game to play where you tell the client that you've got someone in mind, but I don't think there's anything more rewarding than saying it, because you are at that point getting a little bit cocky, for want of a better word. But then to be able to pull that off and to get that person over the line, it's probably the most satisfying part for sure. But I think the other part, and I mentioned in episode 1, my previous experience recruiting into agribusinesses throughout Australia, is the regional element of our role. Obviously, a lot of dealers in regional areas struggle more than metro areas, harder level, it's much harder to find candidates in those areas, less people to choose from, that kind of thing. Relocating is always difficult, many factors. So learning about those regional towns, traveling out to them, visiting clients, candidates, the characters, and everyone's just very different in each town.
That's right.
I think a really classic example that stands out to me, which probably summarises regional Australia really well, is I think it's Moree and Gundy. For whatever reason, you go to Moree and they don't like the people from Gundy, and you go to Gundy and they don't like the people from Moree, and no one can really put a finger on as to why, and it's obviously not actually there. It's more just a joke thing that's always gone through those towns, but it's just a really funny quirk, I suppose, that we see across all of Australia, which I really admire. I think it's quite fun. Yeah,
definitely.
That regional element of it all.
Yeah, and the last couple of years we've made a big effort of getting out there and seeing a lot of our clients. And I was looking at my map of Australia yesterday where I mark off all the towns that I've been to, and there's quite a lot there. We've seen 200 clients along the way, and seeing some of those really small towns and like Lake Grace in WA,
which weirdly has a Tesla charging station.
It does. Just seeing small towns like that where there's just not a lot there. But you go in there and the people are just so nice, and it's great. And then being able to then sell that to a candidate and say, hey, well, have you ever thought of moving regionally? Because there's so many great places in Australia where you can live that offer great schooling or great community sporting. There's just so much to love about regional Australia. So it's exciting when we find that.
Yeah, and especially I think with our industries, they do actually play a really key part to those towns.
Yeah.
Obviously, farm machinery is an obvious one. That's, food and fibre. But the trucks, even car dealerships, that kind of thing, they all are very integral to the success of those towns, and almost become a centre hub for people in terms of communicating, because, businesses are dealing with businesses and people are purchasing vehicles and that kind of thing. And so, it's really tied in nicely, I think, with the whole community feel of each town.
Yeah, definitely. But I guess let's talk about some of the challenges, because, if there weren't challenges, we wouldn't be in business really, would we? So, it's recruiting into dealerships is tricky. And let's talk about some of those challenges. I think the biggest one that I see is
the 4 words.
Must have dealership experience. It's we understand, and it's a very niche role, and you want somebody to hit the ground running day one who doesn't need training, who already knows the product or knows a similar product that can sell it. But there is a wealth of experience and great candidates just outside of that dealership experience that could be good options, in related industries. So I think that's one of the challenges, is that dealerships are very focused on wanting people who already have that dealership experience. But sometimes you can, broaden that scope a little bit and find some great people.
Yeah, a really simple, obvious answer to that, or an example of that, is hire equipment. Often working with the same franchises, obviously a different line of work. They're not doing warranties, that kind of thing, but they know their way around your product, basically. So just broadening your mind, thinking outside the box a little bit. But yeah, that's definitely we always say the 4 words, and it's definitely the biggest challenge by a long shot.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I guess we already touched on regional locations, and that is a challenge, getting people, if you're a small dealer in a rural town, there's only so many people locally that you could look at for the job. You're either looking at your own employees or employees of your competitors, and it's difficult to find people. So often you're looking for people to move to the town, and there's challenges in that, one, getting your ad or job in front of those people so they can see it, and then selling them the town and ultimately getting them to move there. So there's a lot of challenges in regional Australia, but we pride ourselves on our our education for regional cities, and what's on offer. And I think it's it's something that it can be overcome, but obviously it's still an ongoing challenge because not everybody wants to live in the country.
No, and we'll go into it more detail in another episode, but that regional challenge of what are you going to offer someone to convince them to relocate? Because a lot of the times employers will want to just offer what they're offering the current people that are working there, which are all local. That's fine, but they are local. So what are you going to do to dangle that carrot in front of someone that's going to relocate? Because it's obviously a lifestyle move, and a lot of factors that go into it: schooling, hospitals, that kind of thing. So that's a big challenge. We'll go over that, I'm sure, in a lot of detail in later episodes, but it's definitely a major challenge for us and any employer, I think, out there, whether it's dealerships or not. Yeah,
definitely. And I guess another a challenge that I see is preconceived reputations, whether it's real or not.
Goes back to the incestuous nature
exactly,
once again.
Yep. One employee has a bad experience, and all of a sudden that dealership is the worst place to work, and all those sort of things. So,
which is probably exemplified more or magnified more in a regional town as well.
Exactly.
The local chatter at the pub after work. If one person has a bad experience, you're fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah. And then conversely, if you've got a really good reputation, but maybe it's not quite deserved, maybe it's oversold. That could be bad when a great candidate joins and they've been led to believe something that maybe isn't true. But it's just all about that incestuous nature of the industry, meaning that there's all these preconceived ideas about what the reputation of that business is, and that can be hard to overcome.
Yeah.
Salary. This is another one that's a bit of an issue for the industry. Not all positions pay as well as maybe they should. I think parts is a great example of a department that's been sort of left behind in terms of their earning capacity and hourly rates and things like that. It makes it hard to attract people to the industry when some of those rates are quite low.
Exactly. And I think the parts department as a whole is probably the best example, because going back a couple of years, I think the parts was always seen as a means to an end. It had to exist, but it didn't really make many dealerships money. It was just there as a means to an end. Whereas a lot of dealerships now are starting to see that the parts department can be, a successful department in itself. It can bring in and generate a lot of revenue for the business. So with that, companies are now investing more into the parts department, increasing salaries, increasing product training, that kind of thing. So I think the divide between the good companies and the bad employers, the good employers and the bad employers within the parts department is probably getting further apart than any other department. And so obviously pay rates and that kind of thing is really, we've got some dealers in the same town will pay, say, $50K for the same role that their opposition will pay $65 for. Yeah. Literally 500 meters up the road. Yes. So that is a really good example. of just salaries and the challenges they can have, particularly in small areas. But it's a national. Every major city has the same issue as well.
Yeah, and you've also got the issue with technicians and versus the mines and other industries. Dealerships can't afford to pay great rates like mining companies or things like that, because their charge out rates their clients won't pay that. And then you've got the contractors halfway in between that are charging out at $40, $50 an hour versus the 100, 120 that the dealer's charging out. It's a tough game to try and find a rate that satisfies both the employee and makes the business money, because ultimately they need to be able to do that to continue.
Yeah, and we'll talk in one episode, I'm sure, about market rates and where they're at, but it probably goes back to a point we made in the introduction episode 1, where a lot of businesses haven't changed that mentality from, they need me more than I need them, and so rates are much lower. Well, if they don't want to work for that rate, I'll find someone else. Well, that's no longer the starting point. The starting point needs to be, what is the market salary? What are my competitors paying? And making sure that you're at least, in market range.
Yeah, definitely.
As an absolute starting point.
Because there's got to be a reason why they want to move.
Yeah.
They've got to have a better position or better perks or something there to get them over. So
exactly.
So and look, it's we've said it before. It's a limited pool of candidates in this industry, so it's hard to find those people. So that is a challenge. But the people are out there. They're the good ones are employed. They're happy. They're not actively seeking work, but they are there. They're open to new challenges. So they're there if you know how to find them.
Exactly. And yeah, well, I just won't add anything more to that. It's perfect to end, I think, and move on to the next point.
And I guess one of the ways that you could get into some untapped resources of talent is through a recruiter, a specialist recruiter. So I guess let's talk about maybe some of the reasons why you might want to use a recruiter and when would be a good time to do that. So when is a good time to use a recruiter, Tony, throughout the process, do you think?
Well, I think we want to preface this with, this is not a sell, to come use Team Recruit. This is just very generally speaking, the pros and cons of using a recruiter and when they can actually add genuine value. Because I know in our business, it's not like a lot of recruitment businesses where we don't want to just take on the easy, quick roles because ultimately, you're going to make a short amount of money quickly, but, or a lot amount of money quickly but in a short period of time. But the long game, we want to make sure we're adding value to people, and that's what this conversation wants to be about. So ultimately, number one, you want to make sure you've exhausted all your options. You want to have ran your own campaigns, time permitting, obviously. But yeah, really explore your options first and make sure that you've tried everything you can before you even consider that option. Especially
your internal staff as well, because there might be somebody there that you could consider for a role. So before you engage a recruiter, assess what you've got within your own house and see, is there somebody here that could do the job or who would be interested in maybe taking a step up into a position like that? Because,
exactly.
Those people already know your brand. They already work for you. They know what you like to work for. So
they've got the dealership experience.
That's right. So, there's a good opportunity there to bring people up through the organisation.
Yeah.
I guess another time that might be good if you are time poor and you don't have, you can't afford to wait and advertise and see what comes back off the ads. Recruiters, specialist recruiters in the industry, they may have a database of candidates already there, ready to go, or candidates that they're already speaking to about other positions that might be interested in this position as well. So you could get a quick turnaround, obviously depending on the position and location. But there's certainly an opportunity there to leverage an agency's large candidate pool of candidates that could pick up the role. So I guess another reason you might want to use a recruiter is if the role is confidential.
Which is very common with our industries, once again, very incestuous. So
Yeah. And if somebody's perhaps not performing and they're being performance managed, maybe they want to review their options to see what else might be out there. So that's another good opportunity there to try and find some good talent without getting your name out there in the industry as looking for somebody there. So
yeah, and I think it also ties back to the challenge of regional areas as well. Obviously, recruiters can help just broaden that network a little bit more. It's very difficult if you're regional. If you're in a small town, post an ad on one of the job boards, it's going to be difficult to find people because ultimately only people in that area are going to be looking on that job board.
Or the local paper.
Yeah.
It's very localised, and a recruiter a national recruiter would have a much larger reach for people who may want to relocate interstate or try something a bit different. So I guess why would you use a recruiter? What are some of the benefits?
I think the time one, if it's a very urgent role for whatever reason, whether you've lost someone that's gone to a competitor and you need to replace that person in a peak period, recruiters, they've already got people in their network. They might be talking to people already about another role for one of your competitors that someone might be good for to consider. That's the obvious one. And then obviously what I just mentioned before with increasing your network, particularly if you're regional, just widening that net, I suppose, is the good analogy. Yeah, exactly.
And, there are a few negatives, I suppose, as well about using a recruiter. And, the number one thing that comes up is cost. Obviously, using a permanent recruiter can be expensive, but I guess there's reasons for those costs and why they charge so much. And, there's a good analogy, I guess, I've seen online was a guy who has got a huge industrial engine that's broken down, and they employ a guy to come out and he comes and looks at the engine. He's looks it over and goes, "Oh, yep, I know what the problem is." Pulls out his hammer, gives it a bit of a tap on the outside of the engine, and starts working. And they're like, "Oh my God, that's so great! Thank you so much for fixing it."
We've had tons of people come through here. No one could fix it before, but you just did it in 10 seconds.
Yeah. So he goes, "Yeah, no worries," and writes them off an invoice for $10,000. And they're like, "Oh, $10,000? All you did was hit the engine with a hammer. Why are you charging $10,000? Surely that's like a half-hour job or something." So he goes, "Okay, no worries," and rewrites the invoice. Half-hour hammer hitting on the engine, $50. Knowing where to hit, $9,950. So it's about knowing where to hit. It's our experience and understanding the candidates and having them there. It was like, "Oh, yep, I know the exact person who could do this role and is keen to move to that location who could start tomorrow." It's having that person ready. And we've invested, not just us, other recruiters in the industry as well, have invested time and money in getting the database to that point. The amount of money we spend on advertising and time in interviewing all these candidates. So whilst it might be a quick turnaround, on some occasions and the cost might seem unwarranted, we have invested years sometimes in getting that to that point. So,
well, that's it. It's not necessarily that role that you're getting the money for. It's everything that goes into it. It's all the roles that don't come off. We can run two campaigns parallel to each other at the exact same time, do the exact amount of work, and then for whatever reason, one comes off and one doesn't. And there's nothing that we've done that has changed that. It's just circumstances outside of our control or any recruiter's control. So it's really you're getting paid for the big picture, the whole everything.
And I guess there's also the negative ethics and reputation of some recruiters as well. And I think some generalist recruiters as well probably don't understand the industry, so they can leave a poor taste in a dealer's mouth, about using recruiters because, we went to, a large generalist and they only worked on it for a couple of weeks and then we never heard from them again. Well, it's probably because they didn't have a database of candidates from the industry or know anything about it. So, there are negatives to using large general agencies, and I think having somebody that's a specialist is certainly beneficial.
And I think on that note, the poor ethics around recruiters and that kind of negative attitude that's a lot of the time goes hand in hand when people talk about recruiters, it's completely warranted because we've seen it ourselves in different businesses that we've worked in or even just through competitors and that kind of thing. There's a lot of people out there, particularly the generalists, that will give the big sell, we can help you, we've got this, we've got that, this is how big our network is, but ultimately they've never recruited for a dealership before. And so, ultimately they're just placing the same ads that you could place yourself and just hoping to get lucky. And they might get lucky, but most of the time if they don't have that network, then you're really just paying them to just try, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I guess another thing as well is that a recruiter is great at being the middleman and being able to keep both sides engaged and updated throughout the process. So finding out where things are at and advising the candidate and really keeping both parties engaged in both the candidate or the employer and the candidate, and then the candidate and the employer.
Yeah. We had a client gave us a great analogy one day, keeping them on the treadmill, which I think stuck with all of us.
Yep. So, keeping the candidates so that they're excited about the job is half our job, I think.
Yeah.
So that they don't keep looking elsewhere because we understand it takes time for the employer. So, we've got to keep the candidates engaged. So that's another good reason, I think, is getting those both parties communicating and being able to keep everybody updated.
Yeah, and I think even from a candidate's perspective, the value that a recruiter can add is, just getting that process to continue ticking along. Because a lot of the time recruitment's not the number one priority for a dealer, which is completely justified. But, for us it is. And so we're going to make sure that it ticks along at the rate that it needs to. And I suppose hold the hand of the company throughout that process and make sure that everything's getting ticked off nicely.
Yeah. Well, I think that's everything for this episode. So this has been episode 2. So thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week.
We will.
With another topic. So
I believe Phil will be in next week.
We'll join you then. Thank you for listening to another episode of Adding Fuel to the Hire. If you have any questions or you'd like to hear us talk about a particular topic, why not send us an email at podcast@addingfueltothehire.com. If you like what we do and would like to support our podcast, please leave a review on your podcasting app of choice. For further information, please visit our website, addingfueltothehire.com.